Right, right.
Yeah. And I feel like Jeff must be particular about his name too, because I remember in my story initially it says like the Washington Post is owned by Jeffrey P. Bezos. And then before it published, it was changed to Jeff Bezos. So I'm like, okay, well, obviously your name's important to you, it's also important to other people, their names.
That's right. Yeah. A name is not just a couple of words, it's an identity, right? And so you don't mess with people's names. So how long did you work on this story? You said, did you start June of 2020? Is that when you sort of like decided to just go, or when was it? Did you like start working on it, or before you started working on it? Like when this gave you the green light, you did a lot of work already, right?
Yeah, I started on it in June 2021, and it published in December of 2021. So yeah, like 6 months of working on it. Yeah, I remember like a couple of my like first two interviews for it were like the first two was two Alexas who were like, yeah, like I was asked not to say my name at an audition. I was called by my last name in my Zoom college class because of the device going off. The third one was like with a mom who like started crying during our interview because of her 6-year-old daughter being bullied and like taunted for her name by adults and children. Not just, because that's like another thing too. It's like people say, oh, well, kids, like they tease each other. It's normal, whatever. Like they totally brush it off. But the fact is that it's not just from other kids. Like little kids are being like taunted for their name by adults, like people they're supposed to look up to. And it's like, these aren't all like bullies and like mean people. It's just the fact that this is what they are being taught and trained in their mind, just like how I was trained that Siri was a thing in my phone. Siri is also a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like people, they're not even trying to be mean. It's just something that Amazon is like training their brains and teaching them through like marketing and branding and stuff.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And that's one of the other denials or responses when they say, Amazon, their statements, I think they've said a couple of times, we condemn bullying in the strongest terms possible. Well, of course you condemn bullying.
Yeah.
Right. All the many ways they're gaslighting is interesting, right? How they're, and then if you read, if one reads their statements, you can see that they were crafted to avoid responsibility at any point in the language, right? They blame other people. They say that they are working very hard to make it as useful as possible for others. They're sorry that other people are causing them pain, not that they are. Right? So it's they're using their lawyers for sure in making sure that the language at any point can be construed as an admission of anything. So they use it as a platform to express the obvious and the trivial, which is being against bullying. So let me play devil's. I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's just like, I just think there's like a lot of psychology behind this, because I remember, learning about mirror neurons and how we copy behaviors and stuff. So when, you're watching something on TV and everyone's like, using this name as a command, and they're like, oh, it's not hurting anyone, so then they copy the language and the behavior onto like real people.
Yeah. No, that's, I think it's important for folks to realize that the issue here is not the meanness of other people or the meanness of the culture, or even, to be honest with you, the meanness of the folks who are working on this thing, right? Those folks are just decent folks and they're working hard to get the system out, and it was not their decision, right? Some was made at some point by 3 or 4 people, and even those people, when they were making it, they didn't mean to hurt anyone, right? So it's not. So if one is trying to find sort of like an evil or devil, it doesn't exist. I think the devil is like a an epiphenomenon. It's an emergent property of the situation. But I think what is important is not doing something about it is something that is morally, I think, dubious, right? At least knowing all these things, you have surfaced facts now. So now we know. Nobody can say we don't know. So not doing anything about it now. Um, so so one of the things that they do, and I've seen Amazon and all those who defend them, is they sort of say, well, they didn't mean to do this. Okay, that's not the point, right? We are against bullying. That's not the point. All right. The point is, here are the facts. What should this company do now? What should they do? Should they continue this or should they change? But before we go there, because I want folks who are listening sort of put themselves in the shoes of somebody whose name is Alexa, and I know the kinds of reactions people have when they hear that, hey, there's this issue, right? So one reaction is, it's not a big deal. Okay, no, I think you've proven that it is a big deal for the people who are affected. Number two, well, we have seen this before. It's not the first time. Right. So they say there are cars like, I don't know, Catalina is the name of a person, a Mercedes is the name of a person. What would you say to that? I'm sort of playing devil's advocate. Let's say Mercedes. It was the name of a human being, and I don't think I haven't met any Mercedes now because Mercedes is the name of a car. What does, if one introduces that into the sort of the back and forth, how would you handle that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I tried, even in my interview questions, I tried to play like devil's advocate too. And, I spoke to a baby name expert, Laura Wattenberg, and she was like, and she's written about this, and she's like, this is like, sometimes brands can inspire names for people. But in this case, a brand has killed a name. And it's also, and the way they use this name as opposed to other brands, it's like, this is something that plays a social role, right? I mean, you're not having a conversation with your car Mercedes. You're having a conversation with this device that responds to you. And so then where does that leave the person with that name in the conversation? It leaves them out, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't say your name. I have to call you something else. Why should I have to change my device's name when this is how it's marketed? This is how it's being taught to me. When I buy it and take it out of the box, I just want to use it. I don't want to worry about changing things. And that's how a device should work, right? I should just be able to take it out and use it. And so I think another thing is like, you talked about with Amazon, kind of like this denial and all these different things we talked about with Amazon. But it's like, if there are unintended consequences, which we have clearly seen and proven and showed, then why can't they address them? Like, why can't they improve it? Why can't they make it better? Like, they have the power to fix this. They created this. Why can't they fix it? It's very different, like this branding. I know other names have associations, but it's like, this is the first one where I'm like, this plays like a social role. I can't even say this is the first one. It's Siri, right? Like, they experienced this first. And if anyone had like stopped to think like, oh, why don't we ask someone named Siri, what it's like? Maybe they would have been like, oh, maybe we shouldn't use an even more common name for women primarily for this device. Maybe they would have thought twice. But a lot of people don't put themselves in other people's shoes. They kind of just think about themselves, and they want to get, they just want to get through each day. Like, life has enough like stressful things going on, right? But I do feel like this is like very like fixable. You have even said it yourself that they could fix it, that you've told me that from the technical side, it would not be hard to, rebrand and put a different wake word in there, like Astro, for example, which I know they use on one of their products. But instead, they just are making this even bigger. They're partnering with several other companies. This is built into hundreds of products where you can't change the wake word. So when they say you could change the wake word, it's not the full truth, because if you have a Facebook portal, you can't change it on that. In cars, you can't change it. So, I see like online people complain about this in tweets. There was one woman who was watching the Olympics, and there was a figure skater named Alexa wearing a Year of the Tiger sweatshirt or something. The device hears that and puts tiger on her shopping list.
Of course.
Like, is that, I would say it's a design flaw and maybe even a design hazard. Because what if I'm like in the other room and I get hurt and someone has the devices all around their house and they say, "Hey, Alexa, are you okay?" No one can hear me because the thing is going crazy in the house. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think, as I said before, many times in the society, this culture, whatever, it takes a tragedy. I've seen this over and over again, right? For things to change. It's just, let's wait for it, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Now, let me react to what you said. In the following way, first of all, Mercedes is a beautiful name, right? Mm-hmm. It's beautiful and has been killed by the fact that this car, took that name. I've met. I don't know if I've met anyone, but I've heard it's very rare that somebody would call their child Mercedes, right? Here's an example of, I think we've had it before, and it's not a good thing to kill a name, right? Number one. Number two, I think the Alexa situation is unique, to be honest with you. I don't think it's like Siri. Nobody spent their day saying Siri many, many times, and had a conversation. Or they just take their phone, they tap it. I mean, I don't say Siri. I use these things. This is how I make my living. I don't use Siri by saying Siri. I use Siri by clicking on the button, right? That's how I do it. But Alexa, I say Alexa. I've changed mine so that they say Echo and all. But so I think there's something unique here, and I think that's why the story is important, because I believe it's a harbinger or indicator of things to come. Okay, we can give a pass to Amazon's initial launch team, because it was a thing that they didn't think of. And actually, I was there, and I've said this before. I don't think anybody had a sense that this was going to be a success, to be honest with you, right? It was like, it's going to be probably in some homes here and there. It's not going to be a phenomenon where the name is hijacked. So I don't think they thought, not that if they knew that it was a phenomenon, they would have done anything about it, but at least that is one mitigating factor, right? They didn't think it was going to be a massive success, because it came just after the massive failure of the Fire Phone. So they were like very pessimistic about what, okay, well, let's just try this thing, right? And it turned out to be a success in that way. And then the second thing, I think, is the fact that big companies, like car companies, they do recalls all the time that cost them lots and lots of money, because there's a hazard. You cause the hazard, recall it, right? All right. And they do, right? They have insurance and they have money and so on and so forth. And Amazon are asked to do sort of a recall in the cloud, which is change the name. And changing the name, they can do it without having to ask anyone to do anything, right? For example, you can say Alexa, and it says, "I'm sorry, from now on, please call me Astro if you want me to engage with you." And then, what? Alexa, "I'm sorry, call me Astro if you'd like me to engage with you." Astro, how can I help? Right? And that's it. That's the training that needs to be done. So when they say we have to retrain people, that's not true. When they say it's hard to do, it's not true. It's, the fact that they can add words. They added Astro, right? They added it, right? Mm-hmm. And so that there's no issue there at all, technically, or even in terms of adoption. I think the issue just has not been prioritized. That's all. I think if Jeff Bezos decides tomorrow that it needs to be done, I've said this before, it will be done. It will be done in a matter of weeks, and it will just be done. When Amazon decides to do something, they'll do it. They don't care. Okay, you adapt your behavior. When they decided to hike the Prime, Amazon Prime by $10 or $20, did they ask anyone? They just hiked it and said, okay. And actually, nobody abandoned. They just took it because there was enough value there. So if there is enough value, they'll use. They continue to use the service. And I'm, again, on the last thing I would say is that I'm a believer in this technology. Really, a big believer in these smart speakers because I've seen how they help folks, people who are incapacitated in one way or another to do things on their own. Older people who need to play music, but they don't know how to handle a smartphone, or they have to ask someone. So they're always at the mercy of someone. Now they can just ask for jazz and it plays, right? That's beautiful, right? And I work with, for example, the ARP Foundation, and it's great. It's gratifying to see how this touches the lives of people in a very, very meaningful and positive ways, day in and day out. So I don't want to throw that with the baby with the bath water, so to speak. So tell me, what was the most surprising thing, if anything surprised you as you went about writing the story? What was the most surprising thing that you encountered?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before we start with that, I would say I think the technology can be very helpful, and it's more just the design flaw issue with the name and how you get it to activate. But yeah, I think the technology can be very helpful in terms of stuff that I found the most surprising. There was a lot. I said, the part about how many women and girls named Alexa were being asked, by other people, like, hey, your name, like basically saying like your name's an inconvenience. So I'm going to prioritize my robot not going off. I understand, like when I was filming with Alexa Jade Morales in Connecticut for my story, her mom had 3 of the devices. She had them set to different names only because her daughter informed her, hey, you could change the name now. And so then she changed it.
She didn't know.
She didn't know.
Yeah.
Most people don't know because
right.
Amazon doesn't advertise that fact. They just give it an excuse when people complain about the name Alexa being the wake word, which it could also go off to like Alexis and Alexia, Alyssa, like so similar sounding names too. I actually also interviewed a man named Alex. He works in IT and he hates it as well because he says someone will come up to him and ask him a question and they say, hey, Alex, before they start their question.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, are you like, Alex, are you busy? Hey, Alexa, it sounds Alexa, right? There.
Yeah. So, hey, Alex, are you busy or whatever?
Yeah.
And so then it like goes off and he's very concerned. He expressed to me he's very concerned with like the privacy aspect of all this. And so he doesn't like that his name is causing this thing to like trigger and it starts recording once it starts, lighting up and all that. So yeah, he doesn't like it. I was surprised by just how much like Amazon, they really, how can I say this? It's like one of those things where it's like, oh, it's not a problem. If it's not a problem, why can't you talk about it? Like I tried interviewing Ian Freed and he did not, like at first he agreed when I asked him over email. And then when I gave him like one more rundown before we started the interview, he was like, oh, actually, I don't think we should be a part of this. And he just got very tense, and like his colleague Irina was on there from Bamboo Learning. And I told him like, well, you can skip some questions if you don't want to answer them. And he's like, and then Irina was like, well, she said we could skip the questions. Like Irina seemed like she wanted to do it. And he's like, we're going to hop off and talk about it. And then they like hopped off and then came back on. He's like, yeah, we're not going to do it. And so it's just like, okay, well, if it's not a big deal, why can't you have a conversation about it?
You got scared, right?
Obviously, obviously you realize your choices have impacted people in a negative way. So obviously, like maybe there's guilt there, you don't want to talk about it, or you just want to avoid it and act like it's not a thing.
No, they are. I think because I live in this community of voice folks. And that's how we make a living. So I know lots and lots of people, and the silence is really interesting, right? That they just don't want to talk about it because they're afraid. Some of them make money, by launching skills, and they're partners with Amazon, and they have maybe preferred treatments and so on. And so they're afraid. They're scared, right? They're just scared. They won't even tweet or like tweets or engage in any way, right? Because they're scared. And so that's another aspect of this, the monstrosities that we have today called Amazon and Google and all that. there are these huge, I think these are huge centers of power that infect society in many different ways, right? One of them is to turn folks into cowards, right? To little people who are afraid. They want to protect their little livelihood. I'm not saying anything about people's livelihoods, but if you can't take a moral stand, especially folks, the most irritating for me are people who call themselves AI ethicists that I have contacted, and you know who you are. Right? I'll hold the finger without naming names. You know who you are. You call yourself an AI ethicist, and here's a concrete issue, concrete people, immediate issue that deals with the ethics of an AI. Do you have anything to say? Right? They don't have anything to say. They'd like to talk about AI and ethics in nice, benign. You know, they want to speak bromides. They want to say things that are just a collection of words, right? That are soothing to the ear, right? So when you have an AI ethicist or technology ethicist, Amazon, what is this person doing there? And how can they call themselves an ethicist when they don't get involved? Same thing with Google, same thing with Microsoft. Any company out there that talks about ethics, right? Ethics for me is makes sense. Oh, it's a category mistake to talk about a company doing ethics, right? The company does money and creates has stockholders and wants to make profit, and that's fine. It's okay, right? But human beings actually. But what do you think about that? About the reaction of the folks who should react, people who are like concerned about privacy. Privacy is a big deal and so forth. But then when it comes to doing something about it, they just, if it was such a big deal, why don't you get involved? What do you think about that?
Yeah, before I get to that question, I would say like another surprising and kind of like sickening thing I found through my story was when I interviewed Alexa S, whose last name is not displayed like for her protection. But she was a teenager at a camp, and she had boys say to her, Alexa, send me, Alexa, give me up, Alexa, give me a, like these, she was sexually harassed for her name.
Yeah.
Because of its role as a command for the device. And so the boys thought that they could get away with it because, oh, it's a device. Like that's how you use the name.
Yeah.
And she actually also sent me a screenshot from a text thread from these boys that said, oh, I know, let's play a game called, hey, Alexa, perform sexual favors. So it wasn't just her telling me the story happened. She actually had texts that proved this was happening.
And this is only one person who sent you a text, so this cannot be unique, right? It's got to be happening.
No. Lauren Johnson, who does the Alexa is a Human campaign with the petition, and that turned into obviously the I'm Alexa Alliance. But she said that she's had several girls reach out to her sharing those same kinds of stories, and that just made me sick. Like I'm like, anyone who's a parent, like just imagine you pick this name for your child, you put a lot of thought into this name, and then they grow up and the name is just kind of like used against them. It's a way to sexually harass them. Like when she told me that, like I almost cried because I was like, what if that was my daughter?
Yeah, exactly. And so what do you think?
These are ethical issues that AI ethicists should be addressing.
Right. Why shouldn't they? I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Why aren't they? Why aren't they being more vocal? Some of them I'm sure are, and I know some of them are, but the vast majority have been just eerily quiet about it. Why do you think that's the case? Do you have any thoughts?
They think it's maybe a superficial problem. People can live with it. Just brush it off. Maybe it's normalized now to have female names for these things like Cortana and Siri. So, Alexa, whatever, like get over it. But everyone has a limit. And I feel like if they were living it like every day or every week or every month for years, and their name felt like something like to be ashamed of, it left them out of conversations. It made work experiences awkward on Zoom, especially now with the pandemic and so many things being virtual. And even aside from the pandemic, we're going to keep going more and more virtual. So, if they were living this and they were being not included in the conversation because no one could say their name, or they're being called something else, and they're losing kind of like part of their identity, or their identity is constantly being tied to something that has issues like data privacy that they're investigating and all that stuff. So it's like, it's hard sometimes when you're not living it to fully understand. And I mean,
Yeah,
but it's interesting though, because when I talk to people, I could notice like minds changing even more, because I would ask questions like, would you name your kid Alexa, or would you want your name to be used for a wake word device? And the answers were always no to those questions.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. So, so what is, if we were to say, okay, this is an instance of a bigger issue, right? This is an example of a bigger issue. What would that issue be? The fact that the technology, that a big company is doing X to society and human beings are being hurt. I mean, is that the big issue, the bigger issue, sort of?
I think there's like a lot of different little things that lead to a bigger issue. Like if they're very concerned with privacy and data privacy, how do you think I feel every time my name is said, it starts recording? Mm-hmm. What if I don't want to be recorded? You know what I mean? But if my name is said, it's going to start recording. Doesn't that have to do with bigger issues of privacy? Mm-hmm. What about little kids who have like siblings named Alexa, and they're interacting with their devices thinking when they talk to the device, they think they're talking to their sister. So they're sharing things with the device that's meant for the sister. That's a real story that really happened. So this device is recording the little kid saying things meant for the sister. So if these are all privacy issues, which the name also ties to those privacy issues, that's an example right there. Another example can be mental health. One of the moms I interviewed, her daughter expressed suicidal thoughts because she's being followed home from school and being given commands and being spoken to like something that's lesser than, like a digital servant, something that's supposed to serve others. Like she's not a human, she's a robot. And so to be belittled like that by, especially like when you're a kid and you're just trying to fit in, so that shows like mental health. And, if you don't like other parts about yourself, like you could try to like hide it. Like if you have acne, put on makeup, right? But with this, a name, how do you hide that? And it's like, and asking someone to call you a different name, like if you want to change your name, like how some of the Alexas did, can be like really hard, because people still look at you and they see, I see you and I see Ahmed, right? I can't just start calling you John.
Yeah, don't call me John. Yeah, no, I think the problematizing this, meaning defining the problem, right, is right now it's just not there in terms of just a thing, right? So I think what you're doing is important because it sort of creates the outlines of a problem and the elements of the problem, and so forth. So for example, I think that this story is the beginning of something that will become an issue, because we are going to be we are already living in a non-physical world, right? We're living in our minds, right? Talking like this, right? It's it's sound, it's looking, there's no touching, it's not physical, right? Whereas today, protection, we have regulations that protect us from physical harm. There's a Consumer Protection Bureau, part of the FTC, right? And they look at baby crib and little toys, and they make sure that if there is something that has caused harm, and they monitor that in a systematic way. And same thing with drugs and so forth. They have a system, a well entrenched system that does its job of protecting people from hazard. But that hazard is only physical hazard, right? I think as we move towards this metaverse, this these voice, these assistants, these virtual things, their effect is not physical, their effect is mental, right? And I think we just are way, I think we are like in the 1950s of consumer protection, where people could smoke in airplanes, and people could cars didn't have car seats, and there was just zero protection, right? But it took a lot of hard work, right? It took like Ralph Nader, and it took a lot of consumer protection, and there was a lot of pushback, from industries like, if you read and safe at any speed. I think it's a book that was written by Ralph Nader about how he goes through how we went from a place where no car has any seats to it became you have to have a car seat when if you build a car, and they have to, and so on and so forth. There, it was not like, hey, let me explain to you. You see, it's bad, right? Let's do it. Right? No, they had the data, but they didn't. It was costly for them to do that, and they pushed back very hard, and they in fact did very nasty things to these consumer groups, and they pushed back. And if it was not for the tenacity of these folks, right, nothing would have happened, right? So it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes tenacity, or it takes continuous work, and it's organization, and people like you who are writing, and people like Lauren and her team who are building their organization and trying to raise consciousness. And it's not going to be over. I mean, this issue is going to be with us, and I think hopefully this will trigger a movement about taking mental health seriously, right, by the government, and saying this product here is hurting people in this way, and here are the studies that show that, and here's the data, and here's what companies should do, and here's the regulation, for example. So this is my question to you, my last question. What would be if you were able to enact a law and say you had the power? Let's say you had an executive, you're the president, you could write an executive order that would pass muster. What would it be in this specific case? What would you order Amazon to do?
I would say there should be more rigorous testing and focus groups, and before a product is released. And if a product is going to play a social role like this does and have someone's name that 130,000 plus women and girls in the US have, why not get some of those people in the room, see how it feels for them when you have those devices everywhere and people saying, Alexa, Alexa, Alexa.
But my question was actually, we are here now today with the world as it is, with Alexa all over the place and so forth. And you had the power to enact a law that is enforceable, right? That would inflict pain on Amazon if they didn't follow that law, specifically to solve this exact problem of folks being called Alexa. Folks whose name is being used by the bot. What would that regulation be? Would it be like, you hereby need to change your name immediately? What would it be exactly?
Well, they should change the wake word to something else, specifically a non-human name. I know people say, oh, well, anything could be a human name, but it's like, how many people do you know named Walmart? How many people do you know named Netflix? You know what I mean? And even if my name was Walmart and there's Walmart, at least it's something that people could still say my name and I'm not going to be interrupted, or it's something that isn't like seen as a servant, So, and I think look at pharmaceutical companies, they come up with names all the time.
Yeah. And they're all unique, and it's very smart. Actually, yeah. Because when you Google that name, you find only, go ahead. I'm sorry. Interrupt.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you came up with a great name for your company, Lingo.
Yes. I like my name.
Catchy, clever. Yeah.
And it's not the name of a person, right? Right. Nobody's called with Lingo out there. So you would say you'd basically order Amazon to change name, the default name. And here's the thing. Here's the complication that I think we need to figure out how, as we go. This company is so big that I don't what they would slap $1 billion. It would be just, who cares, right? They'll just put it on to reduce that taxes if they're paying any taxes. I mean, they're too big to feel any pain, are they? Like, they could just ignore the law and pay the fee, because they would do the calculation. They'd say, it costs us this much to do this changes. It costs this much to pay this fee. Like, it makes me laugh when I hear that the European Union has slapped $100 million, fee on Facebook. I mean, for them, that's one day's worth of revenue or something like that, right? It doesn't. They're too big. So, final thoughts. What are maybe too big to feel the pain? Is a reality that we have with Google, with Microsoft, with Amazon. I mean, like, you take Amazon. I think I shared it with you. Maybe you took at Amazon, their cap is equal to the next 5 companies' cap combined. So Amazon's cap is GM plus Microsoft combined. I mean, it's just mind blowing, right? How can you punish financially unless you go after the persons or whatever? So that's a problem that I think about. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because they are so big and powerful. I mean, it's like David versus Goliath, it feels like. I don't buy from Amazon. I specifically stopped buying from them because of like the way I feel like their negative impacts on my identity and my life, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And other Alexas I interviewed and parents of Alexas experienced the same. Unfortunately, us isn't like enough. Like it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, yeah, like that's my personal choice. And maybe they have lost some customers for this, but it's like they're so like big and powerful that it's
Yeah.
like it would take like a lot of people like to stop buying from them,
Right.
for this. And so I don't know if it's like, well, you can't sell your product if you don't make it, safe and inclusive for everyone. Like, do you just put like a cap on it and be like, okay, well, if you want to sell this, like make it
Yeah.
safe and usable for everyone, But I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
it's frustrating because, the Washington football team, they recently rebranded and they have a different name. And so, and other companies have rebranded. So I'm just like, it's like Amazon, if you're listening, like it's going to be okay. Like you will still make a lot of money. You'll still have a successful product. You can rebrand, like you have the power to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I just
Yeah.
want them to like know that. And it's interesting because, I think it's also because I interviewed like little girls with this name, like 5-year-olds and like, 7-year-olds. And I would ask them like, what do you want to tell Amazon? I want them to change the name.
Right.
That's what they would say. And so it's like, sometimes I don't, like I said before at the beginning of this, I don't really like, talking about this. Like, I understand like there's so much like negativity and hate in this world and so much is like going on. But I think about like those little girls and like, how badly they just want to like go to school and fit in.
Right.
And like,
Yeah.
there's other things in life that's going to like have them build resilience and challenge them. We don't need to create a problem for them that doesn't need to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is very fixable. So I just, it's an opportunity for Amazon to be like, hey, we hear you, we care, you matter. Let's do something about it, but unfortunately I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if they had a product, let's say, I don't know, their Kindle was hurting 130,000 people out there, they'll recall it immediately, right? Because there are regulations and so forth. But even then, I wonder, right? Are they too big? So I'll leave you on this note because I think there is stuff going on right now. And I think this is one aspect of monopolies or companies that are way too big for the health of society, right? I think the FTC is looking into all these big giant companies, monopolies, and they're looking at ways how do we make sure that they don't poison society in many ways. I think the fact that you have an Amazon kills competition, and same thing with Google, right? I mean, Google, there's mainly the one engine that all SEO people have to. It's like the god, you have to follow the rules of this Google giant. 80% of the searches are done through Google. So you have these bad effects on society, and I think this is one aspect of that is, okay, you have this big company, they just launched an Alexa, a thing they call Alexa, and it's hurting 100,000 people. They have done their business. They don't have a conscience because they're business. They're looking at numbers. They see that it's not worth their dollars to do anything about it. And so my point is, hopefully we'll make progress by tackling like the big issue here, which is too big to be responsive. I mean, if Amazon was a small company, right, they would be responsive. They would be afraid of their brand being heard. They'd be afraid of their bottom line. These guys are too big to do anything unless and until, right, something massive like we're going to, break you apart. We're going to have AWS. We're going to have Alexa be its own company. At which point, that company, the little company called Alexa, probably would be a big company, but it would be competing against many other ones. Anyway, I always like to give this speech about about the ill effects of concentrated power. In this case, the Amazon. Did you have anything else to say? Because I've taken more than the hour, and I do appreciate that.
Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah, just like, I guess some final things that like, you mentioned, with like the FTC looking into like regulations and looking into these companies. It's like, if I was the FTC, I would look at how Amazon is responding to the Alexa issue and very, kind of gaslighting and denying it and ways to just brush it off. And it's like, this is a very, like, compared to like all these things that they're looking at, shouldn't Amazon be able to respond to this in a very clear and concise way? Like, this should be like an easy answer for them, like a win. But if they can't answer something like simple like this, then it's like, how are they going to respond to even more complex issues, right? So I would, if I was at FTC, it's like, oh, let's look at this and how they respond to this. If they respond to this way, how are they going to respond to this? So I think it all connects. And, you talked about earlier with like the, people who are elderly or disabled and how this technology can help them and how helpful this technology can be. And it's like, I just wanted to add, like, there is Google, like they do have their assistant as well.
Yeah. And Google actually has gained quite a bit of market share, but go ahead.
Yeah. So if like people are looking for these smart speakers, you have a choice, and you could use something like Google and still have people in your house named Alexa or call someone named Alexa, and it's not going to go off or order something for you that you don't want.
That's right.
So I think we hit on a lot. I mean, there's a lot with this topic. There's different like angles to it, and I'm really glad we got to like hit on so much. And last thing, I guess I have like this like PowerPoint. You don't have to use it, but there was just like some points I just wanted to like show really quickly, if that's okay.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course. Please.
Okay. Because, I guess I can't share my screen.
You can. I think
I can. It says host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Well, then I have to enable. Go ahead, try now.
Oh, there we go. Okay, hang on 1 second. Because another thing we were talking about is how, this is something Alexa's experience, but people don't have to be named Alexa to kind of see what's going on. Really, like they could use social media. Social media was huge in my reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And people can see how people feel about the name this way as well. Like we have someone saying, I hate any person named Alexa now, the TV interruptions or the device interruptions. And then like these complaints about having people on TV named Alexa, so it's like the impacts are very obvious and right in front of Amazon's face. I know they have a presence on Twitter. Their Amazon Help account is very active on Twitter. So all you have to do is like look at social media and they could see the impacts, like we have a teacher that says, I found out today that I have a student in class named Alexa and I have a class Alexa. I told her that she gets a new name in my class. I'm just calling her 14.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's very sad. For example, this person here, I'm sorry. I just want to make this point, before I forget it. This person, their consciousness is not there. Somebody has to raise their consciousness. I'm a big believer in people just not having thought enough about this and being flippant. But go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like even this person I spoke to, Jeff Rayner, he was great. He has like 6 Amazon Echo devices in his house. So he wants different wake words because he can't call them all Alexa. And,
that's right.
But he's like, hey, can we stop having people named Alexa on TV? And I reached out to him after I saw this tweet. And he was like, his whole mind was like changed. And he was just like, oh my gosh, like, that must be so frustrating,
Yeah, no, these are people who have a brain and they just haven't thought about it. It feels to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, this is what I spoke about earlier, like my boss saying, let's not use Alexa's name. And, so these are like women that are impacted.
Yeah, real people.
And it was like in the dentist office, it was at auditions and at work, playing video games. Like Alexa, right here, she loves playing video games. And unfortunately, the boys that she plays with, they get annoyed because when they do call outs in the game, they're like, hey, you're sending off my device, in class, at a friend's family's house. So, yeah. And even like I said, at least 10 Alexas and several parents of Alexas told me that even when alternate wake words were available, they just still left it as Alexa. But yeah, we hit on like a lot of this. Oh yeah, this is actually how I found you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the human Alexa's account on Twitter, she like follows like a lot of these tweets, and she sent me this tweet from you, and she's like, you should interview him.
Is that what I
And
wrote?
yeah, and that was in 2020.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Lisa. Yeah, Lisa is a good person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you could see like people have like worksheets for this is for like a classroom where they have kids do this, but you have to say Alexa. So it's like being taught in schools, being sold
Oh,
on merchandise.
I see. So yeah, there you go. So that's there's a whole generation that's sort of being raised on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was like during an interview. Her name's Alexa, but her parents had the device and she had to like keep going up to like turn it off. So it's kind of like disruptive. And then
And
it
most
described.
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say again, folks that most for the folks that you interview not know that you can change it, or
A
did
lot
you
didn't
they didn't
know,
know, right? They didn't
or
know.
they
They're
don't
like,
want to take the time to figure out how to do
right,
it.
right, because it's they just you buy it, you plug it, and it works, and everything else is intimidating. I can see that definitely. I see it all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then Dr. Alexa Haggerty, who's amazing. She's an AI ethicist. And yeah, I mean, she said co-writing with a brilliant scholar named Siri. Our reviewer said, we thought an article by Alexa and Siri was a joke. We both have non-traditional academic backgrounds and worked hard for a PhD. No joke. Giving machines human names hurts women in big and small ways.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean,
And
and she's an exception, I think, in that she's an ethicist who's for real. Go ahead.
yeah, and she said she even shared a story with me about how her brother, he has the device in his house, and they did a conversation on Zoom with her niece, and her brother was like, "Oh, we'll say hi to Auntie Alexa," and the kid looks at the counter where the device is.
Auntie Alexa became the device. Jeez.
Yeah, she doesn't even think of it as
Yeah.
her aunt,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I don't want to overwhelm you, but um, yeah, it's design flaw, design hazard. Like these are things we talked about.
So where do you go from here? I mean, you have done a lot of research. I believe that this topic is the tip of a big issue coming up. Like, for example, it could be, I don't know, it could be, is the FTC thinking about including in their Consumer Protection Bureau, if they are not, these products that hurt folks mentally, right? Where do you want to take the story to the next level, or what are your thoughts about leveraging what you've done? Because I think what you've done is very important beyond simply the Alexa issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the question would be like, where do I want to see this issue go?
Like what you yourself as a journalist, since you have the skills to dive deep into these issues, and you understand technology, and you've done this this amazing story, are you going to do more work along these lines? Are you going to dig into the story itself, or are you going to go to a story that's, I don't know, about big companies or mental health and technology? What are you have any thoughts, any project coming up, basically, that are tied to this?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think it would be interesting to do a book because, we've already talked for over an hour and I still have more things to say, and there's like a lot that I think could be included in a book. And just like all these like women and girls I spoke to, I was really inspired by them. And I am definitely very interested to follow the story as time goes on, like I hope that like 20 years from now, we're not still dealing with this, but those little girls will be like adults by then. And so I'd be interested to talk to them then and see like, where they're at. Did it influence what job they decided to take in life? Did they not want something work from home? Because if they do something virtual, there's a higher chance of them not being able to say their name in the workplace. Like if they took on a virtual career path, right? As so many jobs are going now. Would it inspire them to pursue a job in tech? Like if I was a kid and I'm being impacted by this, would I pursue a job in tech or marketing so that way I could make a difference and, provide a more empathetic view to like developing stuff like this? It'll be interesting to see like where they end up.
Yeah. I think, if I may suggest, I think you should definitely do a book. And I think you should continue interviewing people, because I think the story is going to get more and more interesting. It's going to evolve. I think you should do a documentary. I think you've had, I mean, if you can, if you interviewed people like via video, for example, you've had conversation with them, like recorded.
Yeah, all my interviews, I did like over 60 interviews, and they were all Zoom, and I recorded all of them.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of as since we were still talking almost an hour and a half, I think there's a lot of stuff here that is very important in this time of this society's evolution, Western society, as as they get these things into their lives, right? Technology now is part of our lives to the point where we call this device a human name and engage with it in conversations, right? So I think what you're doing is very important. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where you're going to take it. To wrap things up, just so that folks know, this video is going to be in a page with all kinds of information that you would like to share, about yourself in terms of your social presence and your bio and so forth. So, if you're watching this, when we publish it, please make sure that you go and visit the page that has all the information that we have put together about Alexa Juliana Art. So Alexa, thank you so much for making the time and for talking to me. This is probably going to be a 3-parter because I usually do 30 minutes and split into 2 30 minutes. It's going to be like three. So this is going to take care of 3 weeks of not having to do something.
That's funny. Well, I'm so glad that we could talk about all this. And, if, any of these slides are of interest to you to put as any like component or element underneath, that's fine.
Well, I'd love the slides for sure. I personally, I'm very interested in what you're doing because I'm just a guy who's interested in these issues in general. But I think this is sort of a really interesting entry point into a whole world of issues that are very important for us as members of this evolving society, right? Okay, wonderful. So on Twitter, where people can, how do you want people to find you? Again, it's going to be on the page, but like the best way to reach out to you is?
On Twitter, it's just my full name, Alexa Juliana Ard. Okay. And I'm on LinkedIn too. And so if you want to connect, then that'd be great.
Wonderful. Alexa, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.